This is Maarten Boudry, who's giving a talk, Why Conspiracy Theories Deserve Our Suspicion, a Novel Demarcation Problem. Maarten, please take it away.
Thank you very much for organizing this conference and for giving me the opportunity to present my work in progress. Mostly it's based on an unpublished paper, but I did publish an embryonic version of my paper on the APA block of the American Philosophical Association. And now you're seeing the next slide, right? I'm just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Right. So we've all heard that conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists have kind of a bad rap, which is exemplified by common phrases like that's just a conspiracy theory, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's mostly used as a term of abuse, you know, about the popular representation of conspiracy theorists as, you know, these people with tinfoil hats coming up with crazy paranoid delusions. Some philosophers have suggested that this negative valence of the term conspiracy theory is something that is restricted to academia or to academic philosophers. But I think there's recent experimental evidence that shows that this is pretty much widely shared among just the general public as well. And what I find most interesting is that even on people who are regularly accused of being conspiracy theorists, they implicitly seem to adopt the same negative valence, because they would often disavow the label, they as in the phrase "I'm not a conspiracy theorist." The term itself is rarely used as a self-descriptor for your own belief. It's something that you only apply to somebody else's beliefs, and more specifically to dismiss those beliefs. A very nice example of this was a relatively recent documentary. I'm sure most of you have some understanding of French. Ceci n'est pas un complot. So this is not a conspiracy theory. A film that was released by Bernard Grutson. It's about the pandemic and about the hidden agenda of doctors and politicians. And what is interesting about the documentary, and this is already clear in the title, is that they go to very great lengths to dissociate themselves from what they consider to be the real conspiracy theorists. So they say, no, what we're saying is not actually conspiracy theory. But then at some point in the movie, they do apply the label to other even more far-fetched beliefs, for example, about QAnon or about the New World Order, that they don't endorse. So the intriguing part here is that I would consider this to be a conspiracy documentary, because it is about the alleged hidden agenda of doctors and politicians. But these people would rather not apply the label to themselves, even though they do apply the label to somebody else's beliefs in a very similar way. So they also use it in a kind of negative, dismissive way. You can even buy coffee mugs and t-shirts with this kind of a message. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I just do my own research. So most people who are accused of being conspiracy theorists kind of disavow the label. And yet, of course, I mean, I'm not going to belabor this point, because we all agree on this. Conspiracies do abound in history. The Watergate scandal was a conspiracy. The murder of Julius Caesar was a conspiracy. Obviously, they didn't they didn't warn him beforehand that they were going to stab him. The murder of Patrice Lumumba in Congo was a conspiracy in which my own government, the Belgian government, was complicit. So where does this bad reputation of conspiracy theories come from? It could be just a prejudice, of course, but I mean, considering that it's not just something that exists in the academic world, but that it seems to be a negative view that a lot of people hold. I'm not going to consider even sinister hypotheses about about this meme that the very word conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist was invented by the CIA to discredit honest truth seekers and all that kind of stuff. But I do want to make an effort in this talk to rescue the folk intuition. I mean, assuming that you all agree that there is this folk intuition that there's something fishy, there's something suspicious about conspiracy theories. is there a way to rescue that folk intuition? So I'm gonna proceed as follows. I'm gonna say something about the demarcation problem, the old demarcation problem, and then what I take to be the new one, the one about conspiracy theorizing. My demarcation problem, my demarcation criterion is going to be based on a very basic causal asymmetry in nature. Then I'm going to say something about epistemic black holes as a metaphors for understanding conspiracy theories or irrational conspiracy theories in particular. And hopefully, if I have time, I'm going to present my recipe for generating your own conspiracy theory, which hopefully will show what exactly is wrong, or what justifies our suspicion towards conspiracy theories. So again, my ultimate aim is to try to rescue the intuition behind the phrase "that's just a conspiracy theory," because that it obviously has a very dismissive kind of dimension. We've already discussed in several talks. People have. I mean, it's a very nice framework that has clarified a lot of philosophical discussions, the distinction between generalist and particularist. Although I have some misgivings about it, and that's why I want to draw a parallel to the old demarcation problem. If you look back to the original paper by Bunting and Taylor, if I pronounce that right, they define generalism as the idea that conspiratorial thinking, qua conspiracy thinking, is itself irrational. Now, on its face, and if you interpret this literally, then I think we can all agree that this is false, and obviously so. Again, history is replete with genuine conspiracy theories. So if this is the definition of generalism, it would be kind of strange that anyone would defend that position. It's no sensible philosopher, I think, would dismiss all hypotheses about conspiracy theorizing. So because it is so obviously false, and because particularism would be trivially true, I wonder if this distinction, at least the original formulation of Bunting and Taylor, gets to the heart of the matter. Now, if we look at the old demarcation problem, the one between science and pseudoscience, the basic situation of the problem, and this dates back to the early 20th century, of course, is that a lot of philosophers actually agreed on the particulars. So, for example, homeopathy, astrology, creationism were all considered to be pseudoscience, fake science, voodoo science. I mean, all different kinds of pejorative concepts have been wielded against these theories. But then they have a disagreement about whether or not there are some common or recurring flaws or fallacies that these theories are guilty of. So can we find any general criteria to differentiate between pseudoscience and science? In a way, you could apply a slightly modified version of the distinction between generalist and particularist to the old demarcation problem, in the sense that someone like Karl Popper was a generalist, in the sense that he wanted to find a single criterion that was both a necessary and sufficient condition for something to qualify as science, and then by contraposition for something to qualify as pseudoscience. So he believed that there were certain common characteristics that apply across the board. Particularists were people like Larry Lawden, who say, no, this is just a philosophical dead end. I mean, it's appealing, of course, to have this kind of silver bullet that you can use to kill off each and every pseudoscience. But particularists say, no, there are no shortcuts. We have to evaluate each theory on a case-by-case basis. Now, applying this, I believe, slightly modified version of the distinction between generalists and particularists to the discussion about conspiracy theories, I'm going to defend a moderate version of generalism, giving some credit to the particularists and trying to resolve the controversy in a way. So obviously not all conspiracy hypotheses are irrational, but I do believe that, just as in the case of pseudoscience, that there are some common recurring characteristics of irrational conspiracy theories So that even though, of course, we always have to look at evidence, and in that sense, we have to evaluate on a case-by-case basis, it's not just it's not that each conspiracy theory is something completely new and different. I do believe that there are some pitfalls that almost all of them fall into. And when I talk about conspiracy theories, I'm gonna adopt the sociological definition here for the time being as unofficial theories about history. So I do believe that those theories, by and large, there are going to be some fuzzy boundaries, of course, but that by and large, these theories suffer from recurring epistemic defects, and that our suspicion towards them is justified. And in that sense, if that qualifies as a form of generalism, then I admit to being guilty of generalism. You have probably all heard about the dictum that absence of evidence does not constitute evidence of absence. Actually, I think that's slightly misleading, because sometimes absent evidence does suggest evidence of absence. A remarkable feature of conspiracy theories, all of them, even the true ones, even the ones that are part of official history, and this has been noted by several people, is that they predict an absence of evidence in their favor, and they even predict the presence of counter evidence, because of course, assuming that there are real conspirators working behind the scenes, we would expect them to cover up their traces and even to fabricate some false leads to throw us up the scent. So that's a perfectly reasonable hypothesis if you start from a conspiracy perspective. Now, the deep causal asymmetry that I was talking about is something that was first noted quite a long time ago, actually, by David Lewis in 1979. That it's a very general, almost metaphysical asymmetry that just happens to exist in our universe, in our natural world. Single causes radiate into future effects, and this entails that effects almost always overdetermine their causes. Think about this bottle of wine that is falling onto the floor and just being shattered. If you look at just the effects, you can just a small number of individual glass shards will allow you to infer the originating cause, and this is something that happens very often, almost always in the natural world. The opposite almost never happens. So causes rarely overdetermine their effects. An exceptional example of that, and it's exceptional exactly because it's so contrived, is a firing squad. The very idea of a firing squad is that you arrange things in such a way that no one has to feel guilty about being the murderer, because there are different causes that contribute to a common effect. So, but single causes radiate into the future, and even a small number of these fingerprint effects can allow you to infer the originating cause. Carol Cleland, in a very interesting paper from a couple of years ago, has argued that the historical sciences in particular make very productive use of this asymmetry. The fact that most historical events leave a multitude of independent traces. You don't need to find all of the effects to infer the originating cause. It's also the reason why it's very difficult to commit the perfect crime, because anything that you do, if you murder someone, this will have a whole range of different effects. And if you want to cover up your tracks, you have to erase each individual effect of your actions. Of course, doing it in such a way that you're not causing further radiating events, causes that radiate into the future. Conspiracies are complex social activities involving multiple people by definition, some amount of coordination and planning, and they also radiate into the future, as almost all historical events do. I'm gonna skip some steps in the argument here, but I hope to give you just a general overview. Even powerful organizations in documented historical cases rarely manage to keep a lid on some of their secrets. This is like something that I learned from a very interesting paper by Bale in 2007. US intelligence agencies, Soviet secret police, arguably one of the most powerful organizations that exist or that existed on the planet. In many cases, even they didn't manage to cover up their tracks, and eventually many of their secrets, many of their conspiracies, for example, to remove a foreign government, have been foiled and have been discovered sooner or later, despite their best efforts at concealment. So it's very hard to keep a secret. Just very quickly to apply this to 9/11, perhaps the most popular conspiracy theory of today, which is interesting because both the official version and the non-official version involve a conspiracy. It's just impossible to explain this event without a conspiracy. If you read a book like The Looming Tower by Lawrence Wright, you'll see that even before 9/11, the evidence of their planning, their coordination was radiating in all directions, despite, of course, Al-Qaeda's careful attempts to erase their traces. Between the two of them, the CIA and the FBI had gathered plenty of evidence to foil the plot. And the only reason why it didn't happen was because they didn't share the information, because of a bureaucratic struggle for power between these two organizations. And as a result of this, the signals of the conspiracy were lost in the noise. But with the benefit of hindsight, like a mere hours after the event was perpetrated, everything, like the evidence just jumped out of this, like was screaming into their faces. It was so obvious that it was Al-Qaeda. The unofficial conspiracy, on the other hand, does not have any positive evidence in its favor, positive material evidence, testimony, etc. I think the main reason, the reason why it is so implausible can be understood in the context of this asymmetry of causes and effects. It is exceedingly unlikely that an event in which at least 100 of different people were involved and that just radiates into the future, leaving plenty of material and other traces, could somehow still be kept a secret. If you think about the whole elaborate planning that needed to happen in order for something like that to be pulled off, then I think the unofficial conspiracy theory is very implausible. Now, this is I think a pretty clear-cut case. So again, there are fuzzy borders. So it's not always the case that you're gonna be able to draw the distinction between legitimate hypotheses about conspiracies and irrational conspiracy theories. I hope to explain this in the paper. Evidence of absence does sometimes constitute, absence of evidence does sometimes constitute evidence of absence because of this causal symmetry. As time elapses, as you have more opportunities to find evidence of this alleged conspiracy, then the absence of evidence does have a stronger probative value. So very quickly, at some point, and this is my general attempt to present a demarcation, a criterion. At some point in your investigation of a possible conspiracy, you're going to be confronted with a dilemma as time elapses. At the early stage of investigation, conspiracy theories are entirely reasonable, exactly because you have not had opportunity to gather evidence yet. As time elapses, however, either you will have to admit that there was an opportunity for an honest investigation or an opportunity for such an investigation, and that the absence of evidence does translate into evidence of absence. Just as a quick note here, this is something that will apply much more strongly in open and democratic societies. M. Danted has written an interesting recent paper about this, where they talk about our focus on Western examples, I think is the phrase. But so that's something that we have to keep in mind, because it's a completely different situation when you talk about something like the Soviet Union. So either you have to admit that there was an opportunity or there was no such opportunity, and that will force you to come up with an even larger conspiracy to explain why the evidence is still absent. And at some point, you're going to end up in a vicious regress. Again, I'm skipping over some steps here, but and this is not an entirely original idea. the notion that conspiracy theories have a tendency to grow ever larger in scope was already pointed out by Brian Keeley in his seminal paper in 1999, I think. So a conspiracy hypothesis degenerates into an irrational conspiracy theory whenever more intelligence and power is being attributed to conspirators. I'm not even sure how to pronounce that word. And the circle of presumed conspirators keeps widening. For that reason, I think irrational conspiracy theories can be compared to an epistemic black hole. Again, it is entirely reasonable if you start from the hypothesis of a conspiracy to expect the people behind the scenes to cover up their tracks and to throw us off the scent. The problem is that once you start engaging that kind of hypothesis, it's very hard to reason your way out of it. And I think the metaphor of a black hole, an epistemic black hole, drives home the point that it's something. Conspiracy theories are something that unwary truth seekers might fall into and find. Have a very hard time escaping from. The idea that the people behind the scenes cover up their tracks is not ad hoc. This is something that also a number of people have pointed out. It's something that flows quite naturally from the conspiracy hypothesis. And just to give you a sense of the gravitational pull of an epistemic black hole, consider the following idea. How can skeptics be so confident that perfectly executed conspiracies in which the conspirators flawlessly cover up their tracks are fictitious? In a way, from the perspective of a conspiracy theory, this is an entirely reasonable suggestion. But I think exactly these types of questions exemplify why conspiracy theories are sort of a rabbit hole or an epistemic black hole that you can fall into. No, I still haven't said something. I have a couple of minutes left, right? I think we started a little bit late, so 5 minutes, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, all right. What will the next major historical event be? Of course, I'm not going to wager any predictions, but one thing, that should be thing, not things, is absolutely certain. Whatever happens, it will spark some unofficial conspiracy theory. Because pretty much every major historical event gives rise to conspiracy theories, and so to understand why many people are so dismissive of conspiracy theories and why the phrase "that's just a conspiracy theory" is so popular, in my paper I present a kind of general recipe for generating novel conspiracy theories around any given historical event. I'm going to quickly summarize the steps. There will always be an official story. In your conspiracy theory, you always have to refute that official story by saying that it's a cover-up fabricated and disseminated by the conspirators. If the received view already involves a conspiracy, as in the case of 9/11, you just have to posit a high-order conspiracy in which the official culprits are innocent and somebody else is responsible for it behind the scenes. The official version is refuted with errant data, unresolved questions, contradictions, anomalies, which you will always find in any historical event, because no historical event is ever completely and fully documented. So it will always be possible to come up with these anomalies. Exasperate your critics, keep asking, throwing up more questions. The identity of the conspirators is almost always relatively easy as well. There will always be someone who benefited or could have conceivably benefited from the event. So that will also be a pretty easy step. And any absent evidence or counter evidence, again, as I already explained, can always turn on its head, because then we tell you that the conspirators are very devious. I don't want to be too facetious about this, in the sense that some conspiracy theories are actually pretty ingenious. So I'm not saying this to suggest that it's easy to come up with a conspiracy theory, but I do think that this recipe will always work, that with any kind of major historical event, you can always come up with your own conspiracy theory. Now, this recipe, combined with the fact that conspiracy theories have an extreme internal resilience, that they are these kinds of epistemic black holes, makes clear, I think, why why we should expect an extreme proliferation of conspiracy theories that cannot all be simultaneously true around any given historical event. So the recipe, in a way, is too powerful for its own good. Not only will it always work for any given historical event, but for any given historical event, it will allow you to generate multiple conspiracy theories. And I'm not even talking about the really crazy stuff about reptilians and QAnon, etc., but just like something like the murder of JFK. There was a recent Gallup poll that asked people about whether or not they believed that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole culprit, and then if not, who was responsible for the attacks. And then you see that with, I mean, given amount of evidence that there's, I mean, hundreds of books that have been written about this, that still you see in a proliferation of a range of different conspiracy theories in which pretty much everyone who could conceivably have benefited from the death of JFK was designated as a culprit. The most popular ones in this poll were the mafia, the US government, CIA, Fidel Castro, etc. So it is exactly this ease with which you can come up with a conspiracy theory and this kind of proliferation of contradictory conspiracy theories that explains why people have this dismissive attitude towards a conspiracy theory. Probabilistically speaking, you could say that the likelihood of observing a conspiracy theory just in the popular arena, on Twitter, on Facebook, on internet forums, is almost approaching 1, regardless of what actually happens. So probabilistically speaking, whether or not there was a genuine conspiracy, there's always going to be conspiracy theories. And I think intuitively, this is something that the folk, just regular people, non-philosophers, understand to some extent, that it's just too easy to come up with these kinds of theoretical explanations. So to conclude, I'm going to have to wrap up because I'm running out of time. I do believe that the presumption against unofficial conspiracy theories is justified. Again, there are always going to be some boundary cases. The most fundamental reason for that, I think, is because of this asymmetry between causes and effects that was first pointed out by David Lewis, especially in true and open democratic societies. As time elapses, the opportunities for finding evidence, given that a conspiracy has taken place, will get bigger. And if you don't find that evidence, the probative value of the absent evidence will be greater. Intellectual black holes open up when a conspiracy hypothesis can only be rescued by making the conspirators preternaturally intelligent and powerful. Is this a defense of generalism? I don't know really, because I think there is some ambiguity in the concept of generalism. It's not generalism in the sense that I'm dismissive of all conspiracy hypotheses. Obviously not, because I think the particularists are completely right that history abounds in conspiracy theories. Also, that the negative, the pejorative term conspiracy hypothesis is sometimes used in an illegitimate way to just brush off any hypotheses about a conspiracy, something that happened during the Watergate scandal, for example. But I do believe, and in that sense, I'm a bit of a generalist, or a moderate generalist, that there are recurring epistemic defects from which almost all popular unofficial CTs suffer. So not just the crazy far-fetched ones about the reptilians, but also 9/11 conspiracy theories, the ones about JFK, the moon landing, yeah, like the most, if you make a list of the 10 most popular ones, then I think hopefully my analysis will apply to all of them. This is the stuff that I'm working on. So I'm curious about your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maarten. We have a question from Matt. Given that you concede that conspiracies abound historically, what motivates categorizing your view as moderate generalism? Doesn't that require quantifying how many conspiracy theories are warranted versus unwarranted, and showing that more are unwarranted and so have the characteristics you focus on in the talk? If more turn out to be warranted, shouldn't you advocate for moderate particularism?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you conceive of the distinction between particularism and generalism in this way, so if you're making a list of the genuine conspiracies that, I mean, at least most historians agree actually happened, and then the ones that are speculative or irrational, then I would not bet on like the bad ones being in the majority. But then again, I think it's very hard to really list, like to enumerate conspiracy theories. It all depends exactly on how you count. So I'm not sure if that's the best way to think of this problem. So it's I know that some philosophers have thought of generalism as this idea that you just have you have this kind of generic across the board suspicion towards every new conspiracy hypothesis that you're presented with. This is not the kind of generalism that I defend, because again, especially in the early stage of investigation, it would be irrational to dismiss an allegation of conspiracy just because you have this kind of general suspicion of conspiracy theories. But I am a generalist in the sense that I'm not really evaluating each and every bad conspiracy theory on its own merits. I do believe that rather than just looking at a case-by-case basis, that there are certain recurrence flaws in the same way that people like Karl Popper believe that there were recurrent flaws in pseudoscience, and that it was just not like just an endless variation of different shapes and forms, etc. So again, I'm a little unsure about whether I should, whether I qualify as a as a generalist. But it's a good question, and in that sense, I do agree that it would be irrational to have this kind of across the board suspicion of anything that smacks of a conspiracy. So in that regard, I am more siding with the particularists.
Okay, so one of our many Daniels, Daniel Minkin, asks, well, first of all, thank you. Is the claim that almost all unofficial conspiracy theories instantiate the epistemic black hole feature empirical? If so, what is required to substantiate this claim?
At this point, it's not yet empirical in the sense that I haven't really applied the analysis to like a representative sample of unofficial conspiracy theories yet. The only example that I have really developed in some detail, or the only two perhaps, are the conspiracy theories about 9/11 and about JFK, because those are the most, probably even today, the most popular ones. I think it will be pretty straightforward also to apply them to the more extreme and far-fetched cases, but as a number of people have already pointed out here, those are the ones that we pretty much all agree on. And it's kind of, it's not really, it's a bit misguided perhaps to only look at those extreme cases. So hopefully my analysis will apply to those to most official cases. But again, I have to just to give one example, something that I had a change of mind about myself. The lab leak hypothesis about the coronavirus was originally like blithely dismissed as a conspiracy theory, like and because it was a conspiracy theory, it didn't even merit consideration. I think there are actually, we still don't know yet exactly what happened, but I think this is a case in which something that started out as an unofficial speculative hypothesis might actually turn out to be true. So it all depends on, I think my analysis will mostly apply to those theories in which, again, some time has already elapsed. So especially at the early stages, I think it's all bets are off. You could, again, Watergate was initially dismissed as a conspiracy theory. The murder of, what's his guy, Navalny, this Russian dissident. So there are a range of different historical events. I hope that my analysis will apply to the kind of mature conspiracy theories that are already, at least that have been investigated for 20 years in the case of 9/11, and in the case of JFK, even longer. Those kinds of conspiracy theories, I think, will have the feature of an epistemic black hole. But at this point, it's not really an empirical analysis or that with any kind of quantitative measuring. It's just like a conceptual framework at this point.
So Keith says, great talk, thanks. In your view, is it sufficient for some skepticism toward conspiracy theories that for any event, a large number of similarly motivated conspiracy theories can be generated? Or is it relevant that large numbers of such theories routinely are generated?
Sorry, there was a glitch in the connection, so I'm afraid I missed part of the question. So Could you repeat the first part?
So is it sufficient for some skepticism towards conspiracy theories that for any event, a large number of similarly motivated conspiracy theories can be generated? Or is it relevant that large numbers of such theories routinely are generated?
I think from a probabilistic point of view, the fact that it is so easy to construct similar conspiracy theories gives someone who doesn't have a lot of time and effort to invest in investigating any given conspiracy theory, gives you some probabilistic reason to say, well, this is just another one of those conspiracy theories. Given that it will always be possible to come up with multiple conspiracy theories. And if I understand the question right, this is, again, hopefully, if my analysis is right, not something that applies in other situations. So conspiracy theories do have this kind of radical underdetermination by evidence, in the sense that given a certain amount of evidence, you will be able to come up with multiple contradictory conspiracy theories that all make sense of the evidence, that are all consistent with the evidence. Again, it's not really a knockdown argument against a conspiracy theory, because as it happens, one of those multiple conspiracy theories may still be right. But I do think, and my initial aim was to rescue this dismissive kind of phrase that that's just a conspiracy theory. I do think that the proliferation of conspiracy theories allows us to make sense of these kinds of phrases. It's a kind of phrase that is used also by people who don't really have the motivation to, we only have a certain amount of time and effort to spend. And if you're presented with just a new conspiracy theory, then I mean, you have to make it everyone has to make a call about whether or not it's worth investing time and effort in it. And I think just having some experience with conspiracy theories and just encountering them in different situations, like, gives people a kind of a probabilistic judgment of the probability that there really is something out there, that there really is a conspiracy going on. If you just know that this is always going to happen, you're always going to have these kinds of theories, then that kind of lowers the probability. And I think it is rational, for at least for lay people, to for them to lower the probability towards any given conspiracy theory that they're confronted with. I'm not sure if that would apply for in academic philosophy, but it's a kind of a folk intuition that I'm trying to explain here.
So we have a comment from Steve. The black hole metaphor seems a bit awkward to me. The gravitational pull of black holes gets stronger and stronger as you get closer to them. But conspiracy theories are usually regarded as getting weaker when they involve ever more conspirators. Most people begin to recognize that conspiracy theories begin to suffer from a lack of epistemic virtue of simplicity as more and more conspirators are added to the story. And so most people recognize that such conspiracy theories have become weaker theories.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, and that's no analogy or metaphor is ever perfect, of course. At least to most people, even most conspiracy theorists, for example, they would say, like the 9/11 conspiracy theorists would say that the inside job hypothesis that's documented. There's good evidence for that. But then the kind of more outrageous ideas that the thing that hit the Pentagon wasn't even the plane, and these kind, or that the planes are really holograms, they would say, no, this is really, take it falling too deep into the hole, or into the black hole or the rabbit hole. What I do think, and this is something that psychologists have found, is that the best predictor of belief in any given conspiracy theory is believing in another conspiracy theory. And I think just from the black hole metaphor, that kind of makes sense. Like, suppose that you already believe that the moon landing was faked because you looked into this and you believe that for whatever reasons that this was staged in a Hollywood studio. Then suppose that a major historical event happens and you read in the newspaper an official story about this event. If you already believe that they pulled off this huge conspiracy about the moon landing, then it's only reasonable to think that, well, if they can pull off that, I mean, they can fool us another time with another event. And so it's reasonable for one conspiracy theory to lead to the next, and to lead to ever larger and more overarching conspiracy theories. And in that sense, I believe that that this is something that the black hole metaphor captures. That believing conspiracy theories hardly ever comes alone. You'll see that people start with adopting one conspiracy theory, and then very reasonably from their perspective say, well, if there are these people behind the scenes, if they have these sinister motives, if they could pull off that thing with the moon landing, then why wouldn't the same apply to something like 9/11? And so you get a kind of a kind of growing belief in numerous or different conspiracies. But I understand your point about the weakness of the metaphor. For many people, the reptilians, etc., once you start talking about the reptilians, they do understand that this is just going off the deep end. And that is again the reason why I think it's not really that interesting for us philosophers to discuss these kinds of extreme cases, exactly because they're so extreme and not representative of your average conspiracy theory.
Yeah, so Steve has here, the black hole is not a conspiracy theory, but conspiracy theorizing itself.